I think Barrow fans are really enthused from what I can gather based on what they've seen from the second half of last season under Andy Whing, which they finished with just one defeat in 13 games. However, they don't really have much squad continuity. There's a fair turnover of players this summer, with plenty released and plenty coming in as well, which has the upside, though, of giving Andy Whing a bit more scope to bring in the players that he wants. And we've already seen an active window so far. So Barrow are going to have one of the lower budgets in League Two this season, but can they punch above their weight? And can Andy Whing establish himself as one of the up and coming managers in League Two? That's what we're going to be discussing on this Summer Deep Dive. Yes, welcome along to EFL Debate. If you like what we do here, you can do us a massive favour by getting subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. That would help us out an awful lot. Delighted to be joined by my guest for this evening, Taylor, Barrow fan. Thanks so much for joining us, Taylor. Great to have you on as always. Were you as enthused by most Barrow fans I speak to about what we've seen so far under Andy Whing? Bear with us. I'm not sure if we're having some technical difficulties at the moment. Yeah, hoping to get Taylor back on another device. So we'll see what we can do. Either flick forward, I'll sort of try and talk a little bit about the Barrow squad from my slightly more patchy knowledge until we get Taylor back. I think what I'm curious about is Ben Jackson had a run of games last season at right wing back, partly because uh, Elliot Newby seemed to be very highly rated by Andy Whing. So I'm curious to see how whether Ben Jackson kind of returns to his left wing back spot when Andy Whing has his first full summer to recruit. I'm intrigued by the midfield additions as well. I think Raheem Harper's somebody who had real potential when he came through at West Bromwich Albion, was part of the England youth setups and was talked about as a really exciting talent. But he's not quite lived up to that billing for whatever reason, and he's I think dropping down to League Two. I think this is going to be a big season for him in terms of his career. So that'll be very interesting. But I mean, he's certainly got the youth pedigree, if you like. It's just about whether that can translate, because he's had a few seasons where it hasn't yet. But that's part of why why he's attainable for Barrow. Jack Earing, who they've poached from Walsall. I think he's got a lovely left foot, a great work ethic. I think he's a League One player when fit. The only problem for him, of course, is that over the last is it 4 seasons now, he's had massive injury issues, and that's how and that's really limited how much he's able to do. And he's missed large chunks of seasons. I think he might even have missed a full campaign. There we go. Are we working now?
Yeah, I think we're good now.
Yes. Great stuff. So Taylor, yeah, I suppose the question is, are you as enthused as most Barrow fans I've spoken to about what we've seen from Andy Whing so far? Sorry, did you get that, Taylor?
Hang on, the connection's going again. It's like every time I join this, like the connection goes. Just bear
It
with me a
feels like
minute.
the question I
I don't
asked
know
is
what's
the
going on.
precursor to the internet going.
It's like I join and then it's completely fine, and then all of a sudden it just goes. Just bear with.
Well, do you
Let's
want to
see if this
try
is
on
going to
your
work.
phone another device? Because sometimes if you got 4G on your phone, that might work.
To be fair, it does seem like we're okay again.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll keep that in the back pocket as an alternative option, but we'll carry on for now. So, Andy Whing, Barrow, talk to me.
Right, yeah, finally. So, so he came in last season on this off the back of the sacking of Clements last season, Stephen Clements. Obviously steadied the ship brilliantly. We completely sort of transitioned into a whole different side, a lot more on the front foot, a lot more attacking. We just seem to have ideas, whereas under Clements, especially towards the back end of his tenure, we just seem to lack ideas, and we didn't really have a means of ending the bad run that we were on. And the appointment of Andy Whing just seemed to come time, considering he's managed to do such a good job during his short time with us, with a squad of players that weren't even his own. I think that speaks volumes as to the credentials of a manager that. So I'm hopeful that this summer, given the right resources and an opportunity to bring in his own players and personnel, hopefully we can only improve as a football club this season, and really hope to sort of kick on from where we left off, because we ended the season in good form. And it's just a shame that the season ended when it did, because if it was, sort of the middle of the season and we continued playing in sort of the vein we were, who knows where we could have finished, because we were playing sort of the best football we had all season towards the back end of the season.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Where do you feel Barrow are at structurally? You've obviously got Paul Hornby as owner. He has been for a long time. Do you feel like for the club to move? Because I think I'm right in saying this, Taylor. I think previously, I don't know whether this is still the case. Paul Hornby has been the kind of the owner, if you like, but there have been other people. I think in the past you might have had people from the US who have been the ones sort of putting the money in, as it were. Do you think for Barrow to try and strive to reach that next level and maybe get into League One, new ownership and fresh investment could be required? Hello.
Hello again.
Hi.
Honestly, I couldn't tell you what on earth is going on. When I've just done a speed test on my computer, it's absolutely fine. So I just don't know what's going on, but we'll try this.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, from an ownership point of view, do you feel like Paul Hornby, you could move forward without fresh external investment, or do you feel like, Paul Hornby can take the club forward as owner?
I think the issue that we have as a football club is that obviously our resources only do go so far.
Mhm.
But I don't think that's an exclusive problem to just Barrow. I think there are a lot of clubs at this level that are at a point where additional income would be beneficial, but is it a realistic option? Probably not. Obviously, we're not the most sort of glamorous team or a club. That often when you do get these investment opportunities, they come in for clubs that are in areas of the world where it's an opportunity to really invest. Whereas is Barrow really that place? Probably not. So I think we have to accept where we are as a football club and just try and maximise the best way we can. Um, obviously, yeah, well, we can only do what we can with what we've got. And I think Hornby's done a tremendous job. He's really pushed the football club to possibly as far as it can go. But I do feel like there is an opportunity to go that extra bit further. It's just whether we can sort of invest what we do have in the right way. Um, and given sort of where League Two is this season, there's a great opportunity to do that. I think the division is wide open. Obviously, um, the money that's being spent just continues to increase every season. Year upon year, it's getting more and more expensive to try and push. Our budget at one point was up there. It's one of the top 10 in the division, and we were really pushing to try and um, get in the playoffs or even possibly even better. But I think obviously, like I say, because of our the situation we are in, where Hornby is only able to invest an X amount of money, and we're not that sort of club that can try and find these investors from elsewhere. Realistically, um, it's trying to compete, and we've got to be shrewd and clever to do that. And hopefully, we can try and do that this summer, in the right way. Young players that are coming in that can hopefully prove a point, and whereas they're not the most recognizable names, and the money isn't sort of being thrown about like some of the clubs that will inevitably spend and throw money around this summer. Hopefully, we can do our best to try and compete with those.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have faith in off-field personnel in Ian Wood as sporting director and in Joe Harvey as head of football operations, especially from a recruitment perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to try and trust those people that are in those roles at the moment. I think when you do look at recruitment over the past sort of couple of years, have we realistically got it spot on every time? No. Have we probably got it wrong more than we have right at times? Perhaps. There's been a lot of signings that have come in and not necessarily hit the ground running, and unfortunately haven't worked out. And then you've got the odd few that have. But that's what's going to happen when we're in the position we are. We can't go out and buy these proven names and players that have been there and done it at this level. Realistically, we've got to sort of pick up the ones that have a point to prove, and realistically that does mean that occasionally it is going to go wrong and they're not going to work out. So we've just got to try and ensure that this summer, especially given the management that we have, like I say, Andy Wing, I do really trust, given how well he performed towards the back end of last season. I think if we can give him the right players and ensure that we get this summer spot on, or as close to as spot on as possible, we give him the best opportunity to try and really push on and look to go for the playoffs once again, like we did a couple of years ago.
Yeah, well, let's hope you can do that. Let's have a look at the squad then. You recruited Will Stanway from Chester, I think it was a couple of years ago now, with a view to being an understudy to Paul Farman initially. This year, Paul Farman's gone. So is it very much Will Stanway's time to step up and show why he was so highly rated at Chester?
Yeah, I think that was always the plan. I think when he came in, I think the idea was that Farman was going to be there as the number one, with Stanway coming in as soon as Farman does move on, which always looked likely to be this summer, given that his contract was running out and therefore he has moved on. Um, Stanway played sort of the back end of last season, did an excellent job, kept a number of clean sheets, didn't look like he was a fish out of water at all. He looked like he'd been playing in League Two for years at times. Made some great saves, was perhaps unlucky not to get a few more clean sheets as well at times, when he played sort of earlier on in the season when Farman was unavailable. So I think Stanway is ready to be a number one, and ready to really prove a point. There's a number of young League Two keepers, League One, League Two keepers, and I think Stanway is just one of those that is going to really kick on, and his value will inevitably increase. I think he's going to be a real asset for us in the future.
Mm. And I do like the vision of the club to recruit somebody like Will Stanway, to not to necessarily go straight into the best 11, but to kind of put him in the oven for a bit and kind of bake him to a certain point, and then he's ready. Where if you'd signed him, if you'd wanted to sign him when he was sort of ready made, as it were, you probably wouldn't have had the budget to do that. So I do like that kind of foresight that the club has shown there. So I've kind of mapped the outfield squad out as a 3-5-1-1. It might not be that. It might be a back four. You might play with wide forwards. We're not entirely sure, but that's what I've gone with. The right centre back spot immediately stands out to me as an area that you're going to need to strengthen in, because as much as Sam Foley sort of defies age and he keeps doing it year in year out, I think you've got to be realistic about how many minutes he can play next season. So yeah, I imagine you're going to be in the market for a quick, strong, wide centre half.
Yeah, most definitely. I think last season, especially towards the back end of the season, we were seeing not only Sam Foley but MJ Williams having to slot into the back three that we were playing, and I think that sort of showed that we were sort of running on empty when it came to centre back options. Not that Foley and Williams did do an excellent job, because they did brilliantly. Fair play to them, but I think that really highlighted that this summer we do really need to go out and find a centre half. We need to try and find a centre half that is going to stay at the club. There's been a lot of transition over the last 12 to 18 months. Obviously, we had George Ray and James Chester at one time. They were then moved on, and Theo Vassell came in. Once again, he's moved on as well. So we're going to try and find someone that's going to stay for a little bit and form a bit of a partnership. Because obviously we do have Canavan that's been a real servant to the club, continues to be a reliable option, club captain. If he can really find someone that's going to stick alongside him this season and form a real good partnership, that will only prove to be a real positive for the football club.
Yeah, absolutely. Niall Canavan, I think, has won promotion from this level before with Scunthorpe United in 2014, and possibly with Plymouth Argyle actually in 2017, I think. So he's got a little bit of that, albeit quite a long time ago, but he has got that past experience. And I guess in the middle of a back three, you want your older head in there, somebody who can be that organisational presence and has been there, seen it, and done it. And I guess that's kind of what you get with Niall Canavan.
Yeah, most definitely. Like I say, just a reliable option. You know what you're going to get with him. Puts in 100% every game. A real leader on the pitch. He's just got the experience and know-how, and that's in League Two, especially when you've got quite a number of younger players. It's a really reliable option to have, and it's really helpful for these younger players that can help learn. So if we do end up going down the route of finding a younger centre half, then at least we know that they're going to have someone like Niall that will really help to mould them into a very good centre half and someone that can be a real leader for him.
Well, let's hope that's the case. Left centre half, if it's a back three, I've got MJ Williams down at the moment, and I'm just wondering, Taylor, given that you've already got four midfielders on the books who are all of sort of first team caliber, is MJ Williams kind of rebranding himself as a defender rather than a holding midfielder, which he's been previously in his career? Because I think as players get older, it can be, especially defensive midfielders, it can be easier to be a centre half because you don't have as much ground to cover.
Yeah, I think that's a sensible point of view. Obviously, when you sort of are that sort of like ball winning midfielder, so to speak, you do need to have a bit of legs in you, and potentially it is an option that he does revert back into a centre back. Like I say, when he filled in that role last season towards the back end of the season, he did an excellent job. So there's no real reason to panic and think, well, why change things up, because realistically he did an excellent job. So if he's happy to play in that role and Andy Wing sees him as a reliable candidate for that role, then why not have him in that role? Like I say, he did an excellent job, so why not?
Yeah, for sure. Central midfield then, bit of a rebuild, I suppose, because you had Dean Campbell, Robbie Gotts, and Kean Spence, who are so reliable from an outside perspective, at least over the last couple of years. But you've also brought in some players of a reasonable standard as well.
Yeah, I think trying to replace those three players will be a very difficult task. Not to say that they were irreplaceable, because at this level, I think most players are replaceable. However, they did an excellent job. Obviously, Robbie Gotts had been with us for a number of years. Always a reliable option. Kean Spence had probably been my player of the season. At times. Just a very good footballer, but you knew towards the back end of the season, when he'd yet to sign a contract, it looked highly likely that he was going to move on, and it looked very likely that he was going to make the step up into League One. So I'm really pleased to see that's worked out for him, and he's made that transition to join Rotherham. I think he'll be an excellent option for them, and I hope that he does very well there. And Dean Campbell as well. Unfortunately, we didn't see as much as we would have liked from him last season, I don't think, given sort of injuries and various things like that. But again, a tremendous player that probably has a ceiling higher than League Two football. So, like I said, trying to find those players, trying to find replacements for those players will be a difficult task. It seems that we've got to work very quickly to try and replace those players, which suggests to me that the recruitment team have a plan in mind. Moving very quickly suggests that they had those targets in advance and have moved quickly to find them and make negotiations in order to bring them into the football club. My only reservations with them are that are they when you look at them, as much as I've said previously that we can't find sort of the finished article, and we do need to find these players that are looking to prove a point. At the same time, I'm looking at them and thinking, well, are they going to be the replacements that we need? Are they going to be good enough? Because there's very little to me, probably aside from Jack Erin. I'm mainly looking at Scott Smith and Raheem Harper when I say this. Are they good enough to replace, especially Spence and Gotts?
Yeah, I think it's
Um,
an interesting question. I think I think there's sort of caveats to each of them, but I think they do bring a certain profile. So Jack Earing, for instance, I think on individual ability, I think it's probably higher than League Two, because I've seen him play for Walsall and he's got a lovely left foot about him and he's got a good work ethic. But last 4 seasons, he's had several long-term injuries. I think there was one season at least where he was ruled out for the entirety of it, and obviously that sends you back a little bit. And so he's got to sort of find that fitness, and so there's a bit of a gamble in that respect. Harper, again, it's a little bit mixed, which is kind of the way with Barrow in League Two, isn't it? I think he was this really exciting talent in the late 2010s with West Bromwich Albion, with England youth, and then for whatever reason he struggled to sort of translate that into senior football, and he's not really made the impact he would have hoped to in various stints in the EFL. And then Scott Smith, somebody at Wigan who I think is going to be very tenacious. I think he's more like somebody, you know what you're going to get from him. Very strong and tenacious, but maybe not going to offer a huge amount of quality on the ball. So I think all of them have upsides, all of them have downsides, and it's whether Harper can find, with the right management, that potential that he showed. It's whether Earing can find fitness. It's whether those question marks can be addressed, I guess.
yeah, I think you're spot on with all those points really. You took the words out of my mouth, especially with regards to Scott Smith. Obviously, I do follow Wigan.
Oh yeah.
Thanks to Adam, my partner. So obviously, I know a fair bit about Scott Smith. And I do know that he's a workhorse and he works hard, but doesn't necessarily have the technical ability. Um, so it remains to be seen as to whether that can sort of be improved and molded and progressed. Because if it can be, then fantastic. Obviously, Harper, I knew all about him when he was at West Brom. I remember him sort of coming through the ranks there, and then all of a sudden he's at Port Vale, and Port Vale fans aren't too keen on him. So, again, like you've said, there's obviously potential there. It just needs to be realised and moulded. Um, and unfortunately, injuries are part of football as well. So, with Jack Erin, obviously, that's one issue that he's found, but I do believe that the injuries that he's sustained have all been different injuries rather than a reoccurring one.
Right, yeah.
So I think that's not that it's a positive thing, because injuries are never positive, but it's a positive in the sense that at least it's not a reoccurring injury, it's different injuries. So perhaps it's just bad luck rather than an injury prone player. Because if it was reoccurring, then I'd perhaps worry a little bit more. Whereas if it's different niggles and different things like that, then unfortunately, like I say, it might just be bad luck. So hopefully, we can try and avoid the injuries of which that have sort of plagued him over the past few years.
Yeah, let's hope that's the case. Isaac Fletcher's the one midfielder remaining from last season. What did you make of his contributions at Holker Street?
Yeah, we didn't see too much of Fletch for a bit. He came in under Clements. I think he played possibly the one or two games under Clements before Clements went. Um, I think at that time, especially, I think everyone looked like a fish out of water under Clements's management at that time. But Fletcher was sort of thrown in at the deep end after coming from Spennymoor. Um,
Well, if he
he's
was a fish out of water, I'm thinking he'd be glad to be thrown in at the deep end.
well, true. But yeah, he just struggled at first. So I think once he was given that opportunity to sort of bed into a squad that had found its rhythm under Wing and was starting to find a positive trajectory. I can't speak.
Trajectory.
That's the word. Um, Once he'd found that, then we were sort of onto a winner with Fletch, because he sort of came into his own, and especially the sort of the back few games of the season, he really he found his feet and started playing some really good football. So I think it bodes well going into next season. There's obviously a player there that's ready to prove a point in the EFL. And obviously, coming from non-league football, every player wants to try and prove a point. Um, and I think sometimes finding those young and hungry players from non-league and moulding them can be a really positive thing. And I think Fletcher looks to be a real asset. Um, and like I say, honestly, I do think that we can be onto a winner with him. I think could be a real positive and good asset for us.
Let's hope that. Let's hope so. I wanted to ask you about Ben Jackson, Taylor, because really interesting to see that he actually, when Andy Wing played the wing back system, Ben Jackson played more games on the right wing back than on left wing back, despite being left footed, and that maybe have been down to did Duro get injured or something like that, and then he might like Alex Newby, but I'm wondering, do you think that this Jackson on the right is something we're going to see more of next season, or do you think that was partly down to circumstance?
It remains to be seen, I suppose. Obviously, like you say, Duru unfortunately got injured, so that probably scuppered plans a little bit. Honestly, I must say that Ben Jackson was probably one of the most frustrating players last season.
Right.
Started brilliantly, got off to a real flyer. Probably I think he was the top assister, October, November time. And then he just sort of fell away for a few months, and then started to find his feet again, sort of back into March, April. So there's obviously, like I say, obviously a good player there, and he sort of found his feet towards the end of the season to Wing, but probably one of the most frustrating players. But it remains to be seen sort of where he is going to fit in. Is it going to be on the right? Is it going to be the left? Like, obviously with Duru's injury, it scuppered plans. So was it a plan that he was going to play one way or another, or was it a case of injuries? He just had to sort of fit in accordingly. It remains to be seen. But he did a good job towards the back end of last season. So um, let's see what happens, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. You've also got Elliot Newby there, who I think is another one who can play on either side. I'm wondering, do you think there's this potential for Andy Wing to swap wing backs or maybe play with inverted wing backs at times and mix things up a little bit?
Yeah, perhaps it's not all too uncommon for sort of wing backs to switch over during games and keep switching throughout games. So that's perhaps something that we can look into doing next season. Obviously, it demands a lot of stamina and a lot of physicality required in order to continue to do that throughout a game, but it is perhaps an option that we can try at times. And having those players that are able to sort of do that can only be a positive, really. So perhaps that's something that we look into next season. Um, or perhaps not. Again, let's see what happens. We've only sort of a limited window of things that we can look into in order to really see what Andy Wing is about. And at times he was unfortunate with injuries and various different things. So what we saw towards the back end of last season might not necessarily be something that we'll see going forward. It might have just been something that he's had to adapt to, given circumstances. So the sample size isn't quite big enough to be able to say for definite as to sort of what the definitive plan is going forward. We'll have to see a little bit more towards the start of the season and see sort of how things start to materialise, and then we perhaps can comment a little bit more on sort of the intricacies of where certain players are going to fit in and what they're going to do and what their roles are and different things like that.
Hmm. I think one thing Barrow are probably going to need to try and find for next season, Taylor, is somebody who can bring that little sprinkling of magic, that bit of X factor, which is difficult to find on a low budget. But I'm wondering if somebody who could do that possibly is Conor Mahoney, just because we talk about profile of players like Raheem Harper. Mahoney's another one who, while he's not really delivered in English football in terms of over a full season, he's got these numbers and he's had an amazing season. He's never really had that. But when he was a youngster, he was extremely highly rated as a really hot prospect. And there is that chance that under the right guidance, in the right circumstances, we can start to see some of that technical potential. Do you think that Andy Wing has got close to helping Mahoney sort of reach those levels he's capable of?
Yeah, most definitely. I think when Mahoney came in last season, there was a real buzz. He was a name that a lot of Barrow fans recognised. He does sort of have that profile about him, despite not, like you say, necessarily having the numbers and figures to back up sort of the hype around him, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but he came in with a lot of positivity and hype, like I say. Um, Unfortunately, it didn't necessarily work out towards the start of the season. He did have his injuries. Then he was sort of in and out a little bit. Then he was in a side that weren't in good form, and the morale just seemed to drop. And so, trying to find your feet at that time is always difficult. Already. Let alone when you sort of struggling for minutes and you've not had much minutes or game time in your legs and fitness is low and sharpness isn't necessarily there. But I think we really sort of started to see the best of Mahoney uh, under Andy Wing. Like I say, Mahoney, given that the hype that was around him, when it didn't necessarily start to materialise at first, I think a lot of fans did get on his back a little bit, which I thought at times was difficult and a bit undeserved. I remember he missed a penalty, skied it over the crossbar, and you could feel just the tension and the groans, and that sort of highlighted just sort of the frustration that people had with Mahoney at that time. Um, so when he sort of dropped out and then came back under Wing, um, to see him sort of find his feet again, and slowly but surely we were starting to see the best of Mahoney again. It can only bode well. I'm hopeful that we're finally going to have that season where next season he's going to have that consistent run of games where eventually you can then point to next season and go, that's the season where Mahoney had the figures and the numbers to back up his true potential and his ability, because it's clearly there. He's a very good player. But he just needs a good run of games, stay fit, and just maintain the confidence that he clearly has. Because when he's at the top of his game, he's a fantastic player, and it's very difficult to live with him at times. Sort of like I said, towards the back end of the season, he was doing various different things where I was thinking, he's a fantastic player. He's one of our best players. It
Yeah.
was we just need to sort of capture those moments a little bit more and try and grab them and extend them a little bit more. Because if we do, then he's perhaps one of the best options in League Two. I'd go as far to say at times he can be that real asset. And I'm hoping that we can try and extend the brilliance of him just that little bit more. And then, like I say, we can point to next season, hopefully, towards the back end of the season, say that was the season that he really found his feet and truly found his ability.
Yeah, hopefully you can translate ability into consistency. I'm wondering about Katia Kiarte, Taylor, because all of his starts last season came in a wide left role, which obviously wouldn't fit if Andy Wing's recruiting for a 3-5-1-1 formation, and he would be more likely used as an impact sub. Do you see Katia Kiarte as somebody Barrow should tailor their formation to make use of, or do you feel like you'd be happy with him being a super sub next season?
Honestly, no. I do think that the most realistic option for Kasia Kiate is being loaned out,
Right.
and possibly having a run with a National League side. I just don't think he's ready for league football. Um, Towards the start of the season, he was thrown in the deep end. Obviously, Mahoney wasn't fit, so he sort of came in to sort of fill that void. Not to say that he was bad at that time. He just didn't look like he was necessarily ready for league football yet. Obviously, making the transition from under 21 football to professional men's football is difficult, especially when you're going straight into it in League Two, which is a physically demanding league. Um, I just don't think he's necessarily ready for it. And I think that really was highlighted towards the end of the season, sort of the cameo appearances off the bench, namely the performance against Fleetwood sticks in my mind. Just no, just not good enough just yet. He needs an opportunity in the league below, in the National League, just a good run of games, find his feet, find his form, um, and who knows, then he can maybe come back in 12 months and be ready. But I think there's just too many facets to his game where they just don't look developed enough yet. Obviously, when he was playing on the left, he was being asked to sort of drive with the ball, take players on, get the cross in, and he just wasn't finding that enough. The crosses in particular, it was struggling to beat the first man, or if it was beating the first man, it was being ballooned over to the other side of the pitch.
Right, yeah.
Uh, he just couldn't find the right level on the ball in order to find his man in the middle. It
It,
was
it could be that you're right about the National League, because at that level, I think his pace, because he does have some raw ingredients like that, like a bit of burst of pace. I think that counts for more because you get ahead of defenders more frequently, so there's more room for the end product to be um, sort of quite very inconsistent.
yeah.
Whereas at League Two level, his pace doesn't it still gets him ahead of opponents, but doesn't count for quite as much, and therefore he's got to be more productive perhaps than from what you're saying he has been. So that makes sense. So centre forward position, Emil Aqua. I'm wondering if you think he's going to stay on at Holker Street this summer, or whether he's somebody who might get offers elsewhere.
Yeah, Aqua's an interesting one. Do I realistically see him being our number one option next season up front? No. Um, but at the same time, can I see offers coming in? Remains to be seen. The frustrating thing with Aqua is there's clearly a player there, but
Mm.
you only get it sort of every 4 or 5 games,
That
and
surprises me actually, Taylor, because I've always felt like he's very big and strong, obviously, and I feel like he's got a great work ethic. So I would have actually thought that it's more about that he's a very consistent player, but maybe his quality can be a bit hit and miss. But from what you're saying, there is a consistency issue with him.
yeah, I think being sort of that big forward that we often have at the club, you'd expect him to maybe win a few more headers, just challenge for the ball a bit more. Sort of the ball's being punted forward, and he's just stood there. It's like jump. You're big enough, jump, and
Yeah.
you'll likely win the header. He just stands there, and to be fair, in his defence, more often than not, he is being pulled and yanked and various different things. So trying to put up with that is difficult.
Mm,
And maybe he needs to appeal a little bit more as well. Again,
mm,
that's another frustration for me with Aqua is when he is being pulled by all these defenders and he's being pulled sometimes even to ground, he gets back up, doesn't make a fuss. It's like
Bit of a
you just
gentle giant, is he?
yeah, it's like make a bit more of a fuss because
Mm,
referees do fold under a bit of pressure sometimes. So try and win that free kick. You are being fouled in effect. Make a bit of a fuss about it. But sort of reverting back to the point of Aqua, um, he's just not necessarily consistent enough in the fact that um, the goals you want someone that's going to find goals on a more consistent basis. Unfortunately, Aqua's not necessarily done that
mm,
enough. He has scored some very important goals for us
mm,
at times, but realistically, over the course of a season, has he continued to find the number of goals that we need? No. So, um, trying to find that option is difficult,
mm,
um, and it remains to be seen as to whether we can sort of find that combination to find that striker that's going to find the goals on a consistent basis. Because
mm.
trying to find that at this level is difficult unless you've got the big bucks. So yeah, it remains to be seen as to where his future lies. It's one that I'm interested in, but
Mm.
realistically, can I see Aqua being sort of our number one next season? Or no, unfortunately.
Interesting, yeah. So a bit of a point to prove for Emil Aqua because you've also signed Innes Cameron from somewhere up north. Might be I want to say Kilmarnock, but I'm not entirely sure.
That's the one. Yeah.
That's the one. Thank you. Reviews I've got from Innes Cameron is that he's got an excellent work ethic and he likes hassling and harrying defenders. So maybe he does have a bit more of that instinct for the dark arts than Aqua, but he's also got that target man presence. But that I think where some Barrow fans could be forgiven for feeling a little bit underwhelmed was that last season nobody scored more than 6 or 7 goals in the league for Barrow individually. And Cameron doesn't really have a reputation for being a goal scorer. So there is that concern that, yes, Innes Cameron might be somebody who, with his hold up play and with his sort of energetic physical style, might be able to facilitate chances for others in the team. You're still going to need others to step up and provide the goals. And you're probably going to need to share the goals out again, right?
Yeah, I think Cameron's an interesting one, obviously. Like you say, when you look at your sort of goals to game ratio, it's not inspiring, but then you do listen to sort of reviews and what people are saying a little bit more, and you realise that his game's a little bit more than that. It's more about bringing others into the game. So you're spot on in effect that we're going to have to find the players around him are going to have to step up in order to find the goals that he's not necessarily going to find for us. Um, I'd noticed as soon as we signed him that he played for Queen of the South, so straight away I jumped onto someone I know that supports Queen of the South and asked for his thoughts. And like you said, literally every word that came out of your mouth came out of his. So we must have the same sort of contacts. But yeah, so I think he seems a very similar player to what we had with Presley last season on loan.
Mm,
Doesn't come into the club with proven goals,
mm,
but offers something that little bit more. And Presley, for me, um, became a bit of a favourite. He really stepped on and showed that he can do. It's not necessarily about goals. You can bring others into it, but you at the same time, whilst I do say that, he Presley did have the goals as well. That he was finding. So hopefully Cameron can find that. Kilmarnock fans were saying that they were disappointed to see him go. He didn't necessarily get the chances that he deserved, and given their sort of struggles in front of goal, they would have given him a go. So I'm hoping that's a a reflection on him and the confidence they possibly had in him rather than the frustration of the other options that they had. So I'm hoping that he can be sort of a Presley in effect and find goals in his game as well as bringing others in like Presley did last season.
Yeah, I think first of all, if you can't buy a goal scorer, try and make a goal scorer. I think there's that, which Barrow have kind of got to adopt that. But also, I'm a big believer that sometimes if you put all your focus on goal scoring records, you can kind of miss out on other ingredients that can be really important for a team. And I think that what you want to do is focus on a team, creating a team that can create a ton of chances and just basically bank on those chances being finished. And I think one thing I do quite like from what I've got looking here at the Barrow squad, I do see a few players who can create. Jack Earing, lovely left-footed technician. Raheem Harper has some technical potential. Ben Jackson, we've seen he can create because he was, initially one of the top assisters in the league in the first third of last season. Conor Mahoney has great technical potential that's yet a little bit untapped. And Cameron can be a real facilitator as well. And even David Worrell, who isn't going to play a huge amount, he does have a bit of ability and previous at this level as well. So I do think that there's players there that can create chances. And that's what does give me some hope for Barrow. But you've also got to hope that a reasonable proportion of those chances are going to be put away.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think my only concern is that when you look at the squad thus far, where are the goals going to come from in effect?
Yeah,
But like I say, we've got the creative players, so if we're putting the balls in the right areas and creating those chances, hopefully we're creating clear-cut chances to the effect that regardless of who's on the end of them, they can't really miss. As easy as that sounds, hopefully that is something that can happen. So we've just got to sort of rely on the creativity of these players that we do have. If we're not going to find this goal scorer, this finished article that's going to find that the proven goals that we've lacked at times, because realistically, have we had a proven striker since Scott Quigley left many years ago?
yeah,
Probably not. So obviously we had Josh Gordon who chipped in and found the net on a few occasions, but was he necessarily that proven striker? Not really.
no,
So we've we've got to find that recipe in order to ensure that we're getting enough goals. Because I think our strong point over the past few seasons has been the defensive record. So if we can maintain that solid defensive record whilst just finding those extra few goals that we lacked last season, like you said previously, I think our top goal scorer was on about 6 or 7. Theo Vassell was up there as one of our top goal scorers as a central defender. So I think that says it all, really. Um, so we just got to ensure that if we're not going to find that proven goal scorer, like I say, we're going to create the right chances that, regardless of who's on the end of them, we're going to try and 9 times out of 10 put them away.
yeah. Let's hope that's the case. Expectations for next season then, Taylor. I think when you're Barrow in League Two without a huge amount of external investment, hope and expectation aren't always the same thing, because you can be aspirational and you can be forward thinking and you can hope to be challenging the playoffs, but also you're realistic about the fact that you've got a bottom six budget at this level and you're going to be up against it. So where does hope meet expectation for Barrow fans?
Yeah, I think from asking me personally, I think I'm always quite level-headed in the fact that I realise that there's clubs that have the finances and the stature to recruit ready-made players that have the name and have the credentials that we don't necessarily have, so that puts them at an advantage. So for me, I often look at sort of our level as being sort of mid-table, and then sort of look around and gauge it that way as to where we're going to be. So for me, again, this is another mid-table season for now. Sort of looking at where we are as a squad, as a club, comparing it to sort of what's around us at the minute. It's another mid-table season, with the hope that Andy Whing, who has done, like I said previously, has done a great job thus far, can really sort of boost the club, and push us up the table, ensuring that whilst we may not have the best squad, we've got the manager there that's getting the best out of these players and can push us up the table. And I think most Barrow fans are probably of the same mind this summer. I think at times we will have differing opinions. Sort of especially into the Pete Wild tenure, you had some that were really, really optimistic about sort of where we could end up, and then sort of the more level-headed like myself that has probably looked at mid-table, and then anything more was an option on given the credentials that Wild had. And I'm probably looking at Wing in the same respect of mid-table, but I'm confident in Wing and his abilities as a manager to try and push us up the table a little bit more and get the best out of these players. So like I say, it remains to be seen as to where this squad is going to end up. I'm positive in the fact that we've recruited early. It suggests that the targets that have been identified have been recruited quickly and brought in. It suggests that there's a clear plan in place, there's a strategy, rather than leaving it late and sort of like a scattergun approach, panicking and trying to find what's available. So we've moved quickly. That's always a positive for me. And then we can look sort of in the coming weeks more towards the back end of pre-season going into the season. We can then look at sort of the lower market and try and recruit there, because the lower market for a club like Barrow is vital. We've got to try and use that to the best effects when resources and finances aren't necessarily there compared to other clubs, especially these days. Obviously, like I've said, the money being spent, it just continues to increase. You've got to use the lower market to the best effects, and I think we will do that. So, and that market tends to open up, like I say, the back end of pre-season, going into the season. So, if we can try and find a solid base of players between now and pre-season, bed those in, get them in early, give them an opportunity to find a bit of cohesion over pre-season fixtures, and then add on top of that some shrewd loan signings, then that'll put us in a good position. So for now, mid-table for me, and probably I'd like to think that most Barrow fans will probably say the same, mid-table. I don't think we can realistically say that we're going to be playoff contenders just yet. I'm not ruling that out. I think there's a realistic option that can be something that we can achieve. But for now, mid-table, and let's see sort of how things develop.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you know, Taylor, I'm doing my 1 to 24s in late July, and one of my processes for that is ranking each club out, rating each club out of 10 on 14 different categories that I think are going to determine their fate. So early days, I know, but I'm going to throw the categories at you and give me a number between 1 and 10 for where Barrow are, according to them.
Okay.
Number 1 is ownership.
7.
7 out of 10 for ownership. Infrastructure.
I'd say 6.
6 for infrastructure. Budget.
Probably a 6.
6 for playing budget. Management.
I'd say 8. I'm confident.
8 for Andy Whing and the staff. Goalkeeping department, assuming Will Stanway is the number 1 next season.
Got to be an 8.
8 out of 10 for Will Stanway. Lovely. Defence. Difficult to say, I know, because I know you need reinforcements right now.
Difficult for now, given the gaps in the defence, but given what we've got so far, Canavan, looking at Canavan and Jackson, probably a 7, with the hope that that can be bolstered maybe to an 8 or a 9.
Yeah, hopefully defence incomings coming for the defence. Central midfield.
For now, given the various question marks, it's got to be a 7.
7 for the midfield. Attack.
A lot of question marks for now. Got to be. I can't be too negative or too confident. So I'd probably put it in the middle and say 5.
5 for the attack. Squad depth. Let's presume another 5 or 6 additions come in.
Yeah. Like I say, 6 additions required. An absolute requirement. So probably 6 or 7 at the moment.
6 for squad depth. Squad stability.
You're asking this at a time where most of the
I know.
squad's just been turned over, so I've got to say probably a 5 at the minute.
5 for squad stability. Growth potential.
There's a lot of potential, I think, in quite a number of these players, so I'd say a 7.
7 for growth potential. Lovely. Team spirit.
I think we've always had a good team spirit, and I think that'll only continue to grow, especially under Andy Whing.
Yeah.
So got to be an 8.
8 out of 10 for team spirit. Lovely. Fitness.
Question marks over this. I think last season we were hit quite hard with injuries. So I'm hoping that things will balance out a little bit more this season. So I'll say a 6.
6 for fitness. And finally, quality.
Yeah, again, a lot of things to be done between now and the start of the season, but for now, I'd say probably a 6.
6 out of 10 for quality. There you go. That's really helpful. So, final quick fire questions from me then, Taylor. What's the biggest reason to believe in Barrow right now?
The manager, the manager just clearly has the right ideas, and I think when you look at sort of the form towards the back end of last season when he came in, it had us as one of the I think we were in the playoffs when you looked at the end of the season from when he first came in. So I think that bodes fantastically well and suggests that we can really kick on with him in charge.
Biggest reason for doubt?
The squad at the moment, a lot of recruitment to be made. Question marks over a few of them. Like we've discussed, there's potential there. It's whether we can unlock it in the right way. So if we can do that, great. If we can't, then that muddles things a little bit, and yeah, it'll be difficult.
Too early for a prediction then, Taylor, but just give me an overall feel on the direction things are going in. Do you think you're going to nudge higher than you were last season, or do you think you might be lower or around the same?
I do think we're going to be higher next season. I do think we're going to be contending for sort of. As much as I say I'm level-headed, I do think there's a realistic chance we can go for the playoffs. There's always that point that I think we can. I'm just confident in the manager, and I do think that confidence is leading me to think that that is an option. But I think we're gonna. I think the main ambition next season is just ensuring that we're fighting for the top half. And I do think that we can sort of finish around sort of the 11th to, and if not the top half, 11th to 14th place mark. So an improvement on last season, most definitely.
Let's hope for that. Taylor, it's been great to get your insights from Barrow, so really appreciate that. Thanks to everyone for watching. If you've enjoyed this podcast, you can do us a massive favour at EFL Debate by getting subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. And I'll see you again for another Summer Deep Dive very soon.